What's up, everybody? My name is Joshua Yoder, and this is the Joshua Yoder Show. Today, I have the host of the Bartender's Jukebox podcast, a man who likes to help out with other guys with their mental health and try to help bring everyone closer together. Good friend. His name is Mark Bittle. Mark, welcome back to the show.
Hey, how's it going, Josh? Always a
Hey,
pleasure to be on, man. Always a pleasure to be on.
it's always a pleasure to have you. And today's subject is a continuation of like what we had the last time is like men's mental health and how's life been treating you lately?
Honestly, man, so if anybody has followed the Bartender's Jukebox, they know I deal with some mental stuff. And I'll be open and honest with it. So coming up November 18th, my brother had taken his life a few years ago due to PTSD from the Army. He was a field medic in Iraq, and he's seen some pretty terrible things. So dealing with his passing has kind of passed on a PTSD to me, unfortunately, just due to the events of the night and stuff like that. I don't really like to go into too much detail because sometimes it can be a little disturbing for people, but I will just say the events of that night has triggered some PTSD for me. And so with that, with his date coming up more or less, sometimes it's the weeks leading up can have a few triggers. It could be anything from a song on the radio, or just a memory that pops up. So it's one of those things, and I think it mixes in with a little bit of grieving too. Um, because that's one thing I don't think I have done yet was grieve his loss, because life has been so up and down in the meantime. But yeah, so this weekend I dealt with some PTSD battles. But
No, I
yeah.
no, I totally get it. And actually, this past weekend for me was officially 15 years since the death of my nan, my grandmother. You know, but trying to to be on a more positive note, like I was celebrating it because it was nice. I'm thankful to God for the time I had with her.
Mhm.
But I also like look back on it more now. Like I'm like I feel like I'm slowly starting to let go of the pain of that
Yeah.
because I'm trying to like not that I don't love her, I do love her and not want to forget her, but I think I want to try to like move forward and like try to like, strengthen myself mentally and be like, she's gone, but there's signs that she's always with me. And I thank God for that and the time I had with her when she's alive. So I think to me, I think that's also kind of important. And then don't get me wrong. Yeah. Like I get where you're coming from with like grieving wise, it's important to grieve, but I think it's also important to like maybe try not to hold on to those things.
Oh, most definitely, most definitely. And I think a lot of it has to do with the scenarios too. Um, I noticed for my personal self, a lot of the older generation of my family when they had passed away, I think for me it was easier to accept because I knew they were getting older. My brother, it was just kind of erupting out of the blue. And I think sometimes that has the factors too, into like the grieving processes and everything that happens as well. Um, and everybody takes time on how long it takes. I know people that have never gotten over the passing of their grandparents. And
Yeah.
it's a different bond sometimes that they had more or less with them than they had their own parents.
Well, I was definitely close with my nan and pap, but that's
Mm,
just because I didn't fully understand the part of my issues. And to be fair, if it wasn't for them, I don't know if I'd have a kind of relationship with that I do with my parents, any kind, because if it wasn't for my nan and pap, especially my nan, she was the
mm,
one that explained to me that, my parents do love me, they do care. And if it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have looked at it from their perspective because well, growing up, they didn't know how to really explain to my issues because they didn't know it themselves.
mm,
No doctor really explained it to them. So I was kind of like, wow, okay, so maybe, you know, they do care. And simple things that, like my nan would tell me, she goes, well, Josh, if you worry that your parents may or may not love you, look at it this way. Do you have a house that you live under? Do they take care of you when they were sick? Do you eat food with them? Do you laugh? Do they try to
mm.
accept you for who you are? And I said, yeah. And he says, well, then there's your answer. So they do love you.
Yep.
And I also look at it from this perspective too, like they may not be well at showing affection, but there's
Mm,
ways that they show love that nobody really thinks about. Like, for example, my dad worked at a job where he has been burnt. He's had metal falling on him.
mm,
He's gotten hurt. And but he still continued to work and help out anyway because he realized even though he has like say kids that struggle mentally and like issues like cerebral palsy and scoliosis like me and my twin have, he still went
Mhm.
into work. He still cared because he knew he had to take care of us. And if that's not
Oh,
love, yeah, if that's not love, I don't know what is, you know?
mhm. Uh, that was another topic I've already talked with different people about when we got into to different parenting things. Um, One thing I've come to know, and this is different demographics from bartending, I've seen it already where the parents work so much that they weren't able to give the attention to their kids, but it was only up until, 10 years later, the kids would understand that more because they were providing and, they kind of compensated for that lack of them being there um, at the same time. So it's good and bad when it comes to that. I always say to people, especially parents, don't work yourself to the bone. Make sure you at least get the chance to spend it with your kids so they grow up.
Yeah.
Don't miss the school events. Don't miss any of that stuff.
Yeah, and also too, like to have kids like also explain to the kids the situation, and maybe then kids won't be like as upset. Be like, you know what? If my dad was able to, he would be here. You know, or if my mom, same with my mom. Like, it's like perfect example. My mom worked at simple jobs, but like if she was able to, if I got sick and she was able to stay home, and they said you can stay home, she would do it.
Yeah,
So like take that in the consideration in a lot of things for a lot of the younger kids too. And to be fair to some of the older generation, like especially after World War II, there was a lot of stuff that or really explained to themselves. Like, I know some people that are like World War II veterans that struggle with mental health and no one really noticed it or even want to talk about it. And it's like,
it's
man,
all right. So going back into, I'm part of a big military family. I've had over, let's see here, a dozen and a half great uncles that were in World War II. And they all had something wrong with them. And then I noticed the next generation in my family, the Korean War vets. Then all of a sudden I started noticing the problems more. Like as I got older, like as a teenager, I noticed like in my family generational gaps, what war has done to people. I know from personal experience, my father used to get drunk to subside his demons from Vietnam. And sometimes those demons would let loose. And unfortunately, I was the target.
yeah, and it's kind of one of those things where it's like you probably were mad at him at that time, but then like you thought about not trying to justify it, of course, but like he you feel like you're like, wow, if I would have known that, maybe I could have said something, or maybe mom could have said something. And it wasn't like he had a place, like an actual good place to go, to talk about it.
All right, so how can I put this? With the military mindset and stuff like that, you don't talk about your feelings. You just don't do it because then you have to acknowledge something's wrong. That is just kind of a military mindset. Um, and if let go for too long, sometimes even, the mother or the wife can't control those demons. They just progressively get worse. So that's one of those things like I I'm not I have a personal vendetta against the military because I've watched a lot of my family go through stuff and funding hasn't been there or they haven't been taken care of because of it. And I think that's part of why I advocate for mental health. Uh, just because it's one of those things there, the help is not there. And that is part of the reason why my brother took his life because he wasn't able to get into the VA in time to get the help he needed because they were so far backed up. And my thing is, if you can send our kids, and I say it with the utmost respect, our kids because they just turned 18 over to war, you should be able to take care of them when they come back.
No, I agree with that. I agree with that statement because it's like, because that's one of the things that I've always looked at it when it came to military. It's like, okay, like we're expecting them to do all this, but yet we can't at least do something to like give them something to come back to. Like,
Hmm.
like it just seems weird to me that it's like a common problem, and it really shouldn't be a common problem. It should be like a place where, like, hey, you need something to do, like you can come here, or like something like that. It just feels like there's, like you said, there should be something in place that makes it a little bit easier. I mean, it's never going to be easy, let's be honest, but at
No.
least make it easier on them to like come back to and be like, okay, at least I have this to fall back on. So like I don't hurt myself or anyone I love.
Hmm. And that's if you look at it from like a war perspective. Um, just in general, when uh, a child goes into the military, when they come back out, they're a completely different person. I dealt with this with my daughter. When she went to basic training, before that, she had a certain mentality. When she came out, her life was so regimented. And what I mean by that is like everything was routine up at a certain hour. You got to do this. She was always busy. And a lot of people from the military, when they come out, they don't have that stuff to occupy their time either. Especially when you get guys that have retired after putting 20 years in. Their whole life was set on a schedule down to a T. And now, when in civilized civilization, you want to call it, or civilian life, it's not like that. And that is a huge thing for them to try to cope with coming out.
Yeah, and something I've always wanted to ask like a military veteran, it's like, with a lot of the stuff in civilian life that's kind of like not as structured as we'd like it to be, it seems like there's a lot of chaos. I said, do you think that when they come back and they see that, do you think that kind of like affects them a lot too?
It can. I mean, it really depends on the soldier themselves. There's some that come back that can't wait to be back into civilian life. Uh, but at least 75% they are on the mentality because that's what the military does. They train your mind to overcome obstacles, pain, um, stress. You're having trouble with something. Well, that's all it is just trouble. Keep going. That they have that structured mentality that no matter what's thrown at you, you're just going to keep going. And that's where like the mental training comes in for them to weather them for those storms, to make them tough. But at the same time, you can weather the mind only so much. Eventually, it can crack. And that's where I think the help needs to come in for our soldiers.
Yeah, like I mean, some obviously can probably last longer than others. Like some people may, because everyone has their
Mhm,
limits. Some are shorter than others. So I think it's
mhm,
important that like even like those, like say like in sports, like your best player, like as much as I'm not too big on the whole load management thing, but
mhm,
like say like in basketball, like you have your best player, like yeah, obviously they're going to get more minutes, but every once in a while, like you need to sit there and say like, hey, we need you for the playoffs. Let's let some guys on the bench play. That way, like we can build depth and save people from getting injured.
mhm,
I feel like maybe that's like the same way you can do things for the military. Like man, this, like you say, some of these guys go 20 years, like make a whole career out of it. And it's like,
mhm.
man, like those guys, if anybody deserves a break or something, it'd be those guys. They're putting in a lot of the effort, like organizing everything. So it's like, come on, even they need to get a break now and then.
Well, you would think so. So my one cousin, Mikey, he was head of uh, basically munitions, which is dealing with all the missiles and stuff like that on subs. He would spend 8 months out under the sea, and he did that for 20 months or 20 years. And then he'd come back home for about 4 months and go right back out to sea when he was done. He has somewhere around, I think, 16 kids.
Holy moly.
And yeah, they didn't really have that much time to themselves. So, that's what they did.
I wonder how he
They,
found all that out.
what? Oh no, he was married. All same woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
My apologies.
No, that's all right. That's all right. But their life took them from Seattle to Florida to Connecticut, and he's currently in Rhode Island. He's currently living in upstate New York now. But for years, his wife would travel up and down the East Coast with his kids, so that way they can see their grandparents and stuff like that. Sometimes it might have been, you know, 18 to 20 some hours on the road.
Jeez.
But that was the military life. So besides, your spouse being out there going through all the hardships and stuff like that, if you're building a family at home, whoever's at home has to handle business and stuff like that. And if you got 3 or 4 kids, that's one person doing it. So then you got that stress on top of it. So it's like I said, it's work stress, and then you got your civilian stress when you come out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's kind of also one of the things I wish, more people would maybe put more like understanding, and maybe it's the people that normally can do it have like military in their family, maybe even though they're not military themselves. Like, I
Mhm.
don't know, you ever see the movie The Working Man?
Yep.
It was it was a great movie, by the way. I recommend it.
Mhm.
But Jason Statham's character was helped out by the son of a military guy, even though he wasn't military himself. But with him being like some understanding of like military, and he's like, "Yeah, I'll hire you and like be patient with you and help you out get back in." Do you think that's kind of
Mhm.
important to have too?
I think to a point. Um, the camaraderie and the fellowship from the military, I think, is a big thing. I noticed that with my father in his 30s and 40s, like early 40s. He was part of the military stuff, wasn't. But then in his late 40s, he started doing the camaraderie stuff. He joining American Legions, VFWs, and talking with guys that went through what he went through. And I think that's a big part that helps them, because they can talk to people that can relate, but at the same time, you're still kind of stuck in that tough guy mentality where you're not really fully getting to it. You're kind of just saying, "Yeah, these fuckers been through it too," and y'all kind of just shrug it off and go about your business.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and maybe it's hard for them to shut it off for because they're like, well, you never know, like something could happen. You need to be ready at a moment's notice. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think,
Oh yeah, that's what that's what they're trained for though. That's once you go in when you're 18, that is like one of the first things they instill in you.
yeah, but I also I think the camaraderie, excuse me, the brotherhood. I think that stuff is important too because they need to have someone that actually they can relate to. Because
Mhm.
as much as I have love and respect for the military, I do. I can't sit there and talk to them and say, I mean, I might be able to be a friendly ear and listen, but I
Mhm.
can't relate. I can't relate to what they go through.
No, not by any means. And that's I can say one thing after 25 plus years of bartending, um, hearing some of the stories that some of the guys from Vietnam, what they did, what they had to do. It, yeah, a lot of the movies that you see, from those times, you think, oh, it's Hollywood. No, a lot of it was pretty much like that. My stepdad, he was actually shot 13 times in Vietnam and left for dead. And he spent 2 years over in a hospital over in Japan and made, I'll say about a 75% recovery. He was on testosterone shots for the rest of his life, just because there was an imbalance after being shot so many times.
Jeez, bless his heart.
Mm, yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
no,
So like stuff like that happened, man. Like how do you, you know what I mean? That you can't really talk to people in a civilian life on a regular basis of like some of the stuff like that you've seen. And that's why I'm a firm believer there needs to be more outlets for those guys to be able to talk about stuff like that happened.
yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it is kind of frustrating. I will admit it does kind of like bother me mentally because I'm like, man, I wish I could actually do something for them. You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
you want to be able to help them because like you're sitting there like, wow, like especially looking back at like some of my family history, like I recently discovered, and I'm just kind of like, man, I wish there was ways I could say something or do something to like, ease the pain and like avoid a lot of things.
But I think that sometimes like that's us as individuals. We want to help and want to heal others, but at the same time, like that person has to be able to do it themselves. You can. I think the biggest thing that we can do as individuals is listen with no judgment. Just listen. You may not comprehend every word, but just try to listen. And sometimes that's all people need is, you know, just that open-ended ear.
No, absolutely. Like, I 1000% agree with that. Like, sometimes it's best to just be a friendly ear, you know.
Hmm.
And I think that's important. And, like you said, non-judgmental too, because like you said, like we don't know what was being told or who ordered what to do, what, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So I do
Yeah,
agree with that.
and some of the stuff is tough for them to talk about. I can give you a few stories of my my brother. He was also on the Hurricane Katrina cleanup, and he said one of the hardest things for him was when he was down there because of the mass destruction that happened because of the flooding. They weren't able to get enough rescue people there in time, and he said you would just see families walking through the water that was almost neck high, and sometimes turning over a person to see if it was one of their loved ones. And he said that was one of the things he had to see sometimes hundreds of times in a week until it was all cleaned up. And he said that's one thing that lasted with him his whole life. Even though he was there doing, in my opinion, he was there doing God's work, helping him out. But that is the lasting impression that was left from him from a natural disaster. When he was over in Iraq, he worked. He was a field medic, and he worked on these things called striker units. So they weren't really how can I put gunner vehicles? They were just armored vehicles that were able to go through convoys and stuff like that. And sometimes they were looking for was it IEDs is what they called them, basically roadside bombs. And every once in a while, one would hit one of the strikers. He said one of the worst ones happened. They went right over an IED, and he had to basically try to piece his friends back together.
Gosh,
Yeah,
I can't even imagine nor want to imagine that. You know what I mean?
but that was his job.
Yeah.
And but when I talked to him about it, he goes, that's my job. That's what I was taught to do, and that's what I do. And I'll stay working on somebody till I can't no more. And I don't know how many times he's done that because we never talked about that part. It was up to him if he wanted to talk about that stuff. But he would get close to the edge with talking about different things. And yeah, like I said, some of it's just it's very brutal that we take for granted.
Oh, no question. And that's actually, and I know it's past Veterans Day, but I'll just say this real quick. Just thank you to all the veterans, and I hope and pray nothing but the best for them, and hope they find peace.
Yes, yes. Always thank a veteran. Always thank somebody that's in the armed forces. They're part of the reason why you're able to just have your freedom. So we grow up and we take it for granted. Trust me, a lot of other countries have it worse than us, and some have it better than us. It's just the way it goes.
Well, yeah, and this is kind of an interesting segue to what I want to talk about next with you, Mark. You said about
Hmm.
taking stuff for granted. I said like for we both struggle with mental health. We both talked about that, but I've
Hmm.
mentioned to you before that I think some people like taking you talk about taking stuff for granted. I think these people that struggle with mental health sometimes take things for granted, and they sometimes like they don't really appreciate when someone does try to put in like the work or the effort, or just be like a friendly ear, even when they're exhausted about stuff too.
Hmm.
And do you think sometimes, like, I think, and this is just my humble opinion, but I think sometimes, like, and it's no one's fault, like, there could be like a lot of misinterpretations or misunderstandings about things when people try to like explain something to them, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
So, like, do you ever think sometimes like people with like mental health and like even with your own personal experience, like, I think well, actually, I don't think I know. Is like a lot of times I feel like I say something and in my head it's something different, but then some people may take it like the other way. I'm like, no, that's not what I meant. Or someone would say something to me and I'm like, well, are you sure you mean it like that? Or did you say it like this? Like, you can take things the wrong way if you're not careful. You know what I mean? So like,
Yes, yes. All right.
Sometimes that.
So with mental health, there's there's different levels with things, man. So you got your basics, your anxiety, depression, panic, PTSD, but then there's other different things. You have bipolar, psychosis. Psychosis is one where you make up events that could happen in your head, and then you start feeling them. It's that over worrying feeling that you have, where you start making a scenario for yourself, and then all of a sudden it spirals out of control. So I think sometimes it could be in those realms of mental health that make you feel self-doubt, make you question. Um, but if you let it go too far, that's where it kind of goes into that realm of the psychosis, where you start making that scenario very real for yourself.
Yeah, no, like I'll use myself for an example. Like I unfortunately have a history of self-harming. I'm not
Mhm.
afraid to say it, but a lot of it was because I've been hurt and taken advantage of by some people in the past, and I didn't really realize at the time that I was self-harming. I was kind of just going with it, and then as time went on and the older I got, quickly, like not quickly, I soon realized like, wow, I was hurting myself. Like looking back at
Mhm.
some of my writing, some of back my other stuff, I'm like, man, I was self-harming mentally and I didn't realize it.
Yeah.
And a lot of it was it was more psychological than physical. I mean, I did do some physical harm to myself, but it was more like psychological. Like, to this day, I still, struggle with looking at my hands because I get tremors, and I look at my arms sometimes and I don't really like looking at them because sometimes I see scars on them and I don't really want to. I mean, I know they're not actually there, but I still see them, if that makes sense.
Hmm. All right. So, like you said earlier, I think sometimes it's about perspective, and I think we need to see like a different perspective for ourselves sometimes. It's like when we were talking about earlier, like, not be judgmental and stuff like that. But in those moments there, you're being judgmental of yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think that's where like you have to have that defining moment. Like if you're not going to do that, like if you don't want to be judgmental to somebody else, be easier on yourself.
No, that
It's
makes sense. And it was
because
definitely one of those.
it's almost like you're training yourself to be more positive. They say if you say a positive affirmation every day, it's supposed to, train yourself, your mind, your emotions, your body to start feeling that in a sense.
Yeah, and also I think it also should be noted too. Like I'm slow to like pick up on things, and that can be frustrating sometimes. And we can all make mistakes, but somebody can say, "Oh, hey, man, just so you know." I mean, one of the things I always got frustrated with was someone can ask you like, "Hey, Josh, can you do A, B, and C?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." And
Mhm.
then I would do it, and then somebody would be like, "Well, how come you didn't do B?" And I'm like, "What do you mean? I said this and that." Like sometimes like some things could slip past my mind, and
Mhm.
I was like, "Oh," and then I feel bad. I'm like, "Oh, dude, I'm so sorry. I thought you said this and that." And I said, "Well, I did, but I also asked you to do that too." And I'm like, "Oh, crap. I'm sorry." You know? And it's little things like that that I started to notice when I realized, like, oh, wow, I was like really hard on myself for the longest time?
Mhm.
Was it?
I, that's
I was
one of
just
those
gonna,
things too. Like, oh no, go ahead. I'm sorry.
sorry, no, I was just gonna ask you, is like, has there ever been a moment like that for you where you realize, like, oh, wow, like I'm doing something you know what I mean?
Every day, every day is a new revelation in one way or another. And I'm a firm believer in that. If you are not learning every day, you're not growing. Regardless of what your emotions are. How can I put this? Because the one thing I've learned is self-doubt, self-doubt, self-doubt has gotten me nowhere. Because if I look at it from this perspective, if I say to myself, I should have went to Hawaii. Well, why didn't I? The only person holding me back is me. And I think part of that it incorporates into our daily lives. So if you say to yourself, I wish I want to be happy, or I wish I want to be this, s- it's tough to achieve that because you're searching for it, if that makes sense. Because you put so much pressure on it that you don't realize the feelings that go behind that.
Yeah, no, that
because
makes that,
you're seeking that.
no, that makes perfect sense because I've been called a truth seeker, and I consider myself a truth seeker. Like I'm like, you want to like, okay, well, why can't I? And then I think that kind of has led, and I thank God for it every day. Like I think that's what led me to realize, like, oh wow, I was really self harming. Like I look back at some of my old writing, whether it be poetry or little short stories that I did or stuff that I'd written when I was in high school. I'm like, wow, I was self abusing like really bad, and I didn't realize
Mhm.
it.
But if you look at about it in like if you look at it in writing though, that might have been your outlet at the time.
That's
So
true.
I have a ton of tattoos on me. That was my way of self-harm. If I change my facial hair or my hair, and when I say hair, it's basically just cutting it down to a buzz cut. That's my way of self-harm, but it's how can I put it? It's a maintenance thing that I'm doing to myself that's not actually harming me, but I'm just changing my feature on me, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like it's like a psychological thing, kind of like how I was.
Yep. But that's my way of coping with those things and saying, I if I if I still have those feelings, I need to find another outlet for it, another way around it. And that's my way of standing up against it. I alter my beard, I alter my hair, or I get a tattoo.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because like I went back to look at some of my old writing, and I was like, wow, like I didn't think I could think of this. And honestly, I don't remember how I came up with some of it. Like, and to
Hmm.
be honest with you, like it went from being, it still is like dark and gothic in some degree, but there's now something beautiful out of it because I was like, things changed when I looked at it, things a little differently, and it became
Hmm.
something different, and it became something beautiful. And I was like, wow, I never thought I could come up with this. And I was like, wow, this seems really cool. Like I get excited about it, like happy about it now.
Hmm. Yeah. All right. So there's been if you look back in history, almost every great mind was on the verge of lunacy in one way or another.
Yeah, what's the
Be it
phrase?
art, be it art, be it poetry, whatever it is, or even Winston Churchill, for instance, made some of the biggest decisions in war, drunk off his ass, and in some probably bad psychosis fits of rage because of that. But we look at him in history and we go, he was a stand-up guy, but he was on the verge of lunacy.
Yeah, and you could say that about Vincent Van Gogh as well.
Well, without a doubt, Pablo Picasso, you name it, man. And,
Edgar
and
Allan
that's the thing, like Edgar Allan Poe. But yeah, like if we look at it from that perspective, like we have all these great artists and stuff like that out there, but what mental torment were they going through that we look at them as inspiration?
Yeah, do you think that's sometimes a mistake though? Like maybe the people they're like people like, yeah, like Edgar Allan Poe was a genius. People like sometimes like he was tortured. Like, did anyone ever thought about like maybe reaching out to him? Not there wasn't someone that was. Obviously I wasn't alive when he was around, but
All right. So right around those times, and here's where it's very fucked up. I'd say from the 1800s, and excuse my language, when asylums were starting to first come about, and they were starting to first work with mental disorders or whatever, you could go to jail. Like they used it as a punishment. So I forget one of the things I was reading. If a wife didn't do something or whatever, the husband could send her to the mental hospital, and they would do all kinds of treatments from like lobotomies to shock treatments and stuff like that. But for what? Nobody understood what was going on.
or at least try to find the source. Like, some people like how like some people like to drink or like
Hmm.
smoke or do something like people are saying like, well, if you get rid of the drinking, then you'll get rid of your problem. I'm like thinking, well, what made them drink in the first place?
Hmm.
You never hear
But see,
anyone say it.
that's modern day thinking, though. Back in those days, if you had any kind of mental disorder, it was basically lumped into one big category. There wasn't, there wasn't, 100 different subcategories to it. It was you were now down to like one or two things, and they stuck with their treatments, regardless if it was. You could have been a schizophrenic, or you could have been somebody that was dealing with a panic attack. And a panic attack is something easily to change. Schizophrenia, on the other hand, is not. But in that balance, you would both get the same treatment.
That's true.
So back in those days, they didn't have that awareness that we have today over it. And I do think that how can I put this? With us starting to understand more and more about mental health, and the breakdowns of it, I don't think we have as much creativity as we used to, though. We don't have artists like Van Gogh. We don't have artists like Pablo Picasso today. Or you ever go over to you know, Europe and you're seeing like Michelangelo stuff and Da Vinci stuff. Where did that creativity go? And it almost seems like, and this is, I don't want to say it's conspiracy or anything like that, but maybe an observation. I noticed as time went on, during those periods when they started working more and more with mental health, that's when that stuff kind of faded away.
Well, to be honest with you, I think I might have an idea of that. I don't think it's so much a conspiracy. I think it's just like how the world is today, where like it's fear. Like people, like if they come up with something and then people see it, they don't want to feel like, "Well, this guy's weird," for coming up with this. Like, they're
Mhm.
scared of being judged. You know what I mean? Like I'll use
I,
me for an Oh,
yeah.
I was just gonna use myself as an example. I like to write like gothic romance and as
Mhm.
well as like religious and all that stuff. And there's sometimes when I write something, I'm like, man, I'm kind of scared that somebody might think I'm a creep or a weirdo. And I'm not trying to be. I'm just like, this is just what I thought and felt and thought it was cool. Like
Mhm.
I was trying to be respectful still about it. And I think that's kind
Mhm.
of like killing a lot of things too. Like people are scared of being judged and stuff.
You know what though? I think, and this is where I'll say over I think the last 3 years, I think more of the world has wanted to be judged, like the they them movement. It was, and I'm not saying this in any bad direction in any way, shape, or form. So anybody that's listening to this, please don't take it that way. In the they them movement, they wanted to take themselves out of an identity, but it be identified at the same time. Does that make sense?
No, I hear what you're saying because, like, honestly, like, to going back to what I said before about some of like the romantic stuff that I like to write, I
Yeah.
always was scared of like people thinking like, oh, I'm being misogynistic or like I'm being like mean or anything like that. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to be like appreciative.
It's
It's just
it's writing.
yeah, and it's like I'm not, and without actually getting to know, I think that's another problem too. They don't actually try to get to know the writer. Like,
Mm.
yeah, like, but I'm trying to make it like there's something beautiful out of this. Like, there's something dark happening, and then I'm using this to like create something beautiful, like as a way of bringing hope and happiness. There's nothing mean about what I'm trying to do. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Oh, most definitely.
I think that's like a factor too. I think a lot of and I'm not trying to be mean spirited to anybody either, but I think, there's a lot of politics and political stuff that get in the way that like completely ruined like what someone's actually trying to do. Why don't you actually get to know what the writer's feeling when they, what I mean? Why would I ask an quote unquote expert when the person that wrote it's right there? And I would just be like, oh, hey, why did you write it like this or that? What was your mindset like? You know what I mean?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's one thing too that happens is like once books get or writings get dispersed out, you know, we've I've come to find myself when I'm reading a book or a story that I kind of fall into that zone and try to envision what the artist is thinking, feeling, or writing. Um, but there's not those meet and greets like there used to be. How many book signings were there on a daily basis back in, I don't know, late 90s, early 2000s? Everything's digital nowadays, so we really don't get that meet and greet and kind of get to pick the artist's brain.
Well, and also too, like if you look at a lot of historical stuff that people say, there's people there that no longer are with us and they
Yep.
can't really. they can't defend themselves, and then somebody would say, well, this is why they wrote it like that, and I'm like, it's like what you said earlier. It's like, well, that's modern way of thinking. That may not
Yeah.
even be what that person meant when they wrote it.
Hmm.
Heck, like take musicians for I love music for those example. Like there's a guy that I'm like, wow, this is a really upbeat and happy song. But then when you read the lyrics and you listen to him talking about it, you're like, wow, this is really depressing.
Yeah, it's like the song "Semi Charmed Life" by Third Eye Blind.
Oh yes.
It sounds like one of the happiest songs in the world, but there is a non-radio edited version of the song that goes a little bit deeper. But the song is about crystal meth addiction.
Yikes.
Yeah, but it was a hit song and people got into it, but nobody knew what it was about
Well,
until they
yeah, I
broke it
mean,
down.
yeah, exactly. Or like they actually listen to somebody, like the person that wrote it, they're like, oh yeah, this is why I wrote it and this was about. And they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, yeah, I've seen it already where somebody wrote a song and you think it's about like, oh, his girlfriend, and they're like, no, that was about my dog, and you're like, oh, okay. I mean, I get the sentiment behind it, but you go, oh, all right, yeah,
Yeah, but it's awesome though, and it makes you appreciate dogs more, I'd say.
yeah, yeah. You know,
But
or there's something goofy like it sounds like they're talking about washing a car, but really they're like repairing the house or something. And you're like, how'd you get that from that?
yeah, no, exactly. Like some people like they like even like they try to make like rock and metal like this evil thing, but if you listen to some of the lyrics or some of the stories that talk about it's like overcoming like say what we're talking about like mental health adversity. It's like there's nothing evil about this. What are you talking about?
But one of the best bands for it. The name of the band is called Hate Breed. Hate Breed.
Yeah,
They are a very very heavy band, but they have some of the most positive lyrics ever.
yeah, and they
It's
some I was just gonna say like and yeah, but when like you said about the name Hatebreed, I've heard of them, great band, but I think when people see the word Hatebreed, they're like, well, they're trying to be like these mad evil people, and then when you listen to them, they're like, well, no, it's because we're talking about how people are breeding hate, and we're trying to
yep.
stop that. That's why they're named that.
Hmm. So, all right, you've heard of the band Godsmack?
Oh, I love Godsmack.
All right, so how they got their band? All right, but their band name was everybody thought it was just like a religious thing, religion, and really, they came down to somebody had said your sound is like a smack from God right in the ears, and that's how they got their name, Godsmack.
Yeah, but I also heard that somebody was like they were talking about coming up with band names, and all of a sudden something like flew at him and hit him in the face, and they're like, "Well, God just smacked you in the face."
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's like nothing really. It could be just a coincidence. It wasn't anything mean spirited at all.
Nope, not by any means. Not by any means.
Yeah, and also, and I sometimes, and maybe this is just me, but I'm like, I sometimes believe like I think God steps in and helps out sometimes, and like shows you like like gives you like as weird as it may sound to some people, I feel like God sometimes steps in and like puts that and you're like, oh, that's a great idea. I'll call it that or do this.
I think there are those moments out there. Yeah, most definitely. All right, so since we touched on religion, and you said sometimes God, puts you in those directions. What would you say to somebody that has the exact opposite of those moments, where they might feel that God put them through hell?
Oh, no, honestly, I look at it like, does it suck at the time? Yeah, because I've been going through some stuff as well. It's like I look at it like I feel like it is still all part of God's plan.
Hmm.
I look at it like but I think that's what's meant to happen. I think we're going to have our ups. I think it's just like an example of life. Like we're going to have our ups and we're going to have our downs.
Hmm.
And maybe in a weird way, it's hard to explain. I don't know if I'm explaining it well enough, but it's like part of me looks at it like Like, like does it suck at the time? Absolutely. Do I get angry sometimes about it? Of course I do. But I also
Hmm.
look at like, well, look what came out of it afterwards. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I would
All
tell
right.
somebody, like good
Here's
days will pass, but so will bad days.
so here's a quick question for you.
Sure.
Do you think God has it planned out, or do you think it's spur of the moment?
Mm, I don't know. Like that's an interesting question. Maybe it's a combination of both, but like it said, he knew us before we were even born. So it's like maybe he knew what our flaws were going to be, what our positive traits about us were going to be. And I like maybe there's people. Sometimes I feel like there's someone that's like going through a rough time, and you're nice to them. Like maybe I was put there to maybe help that person, like come up, or like if I'm going like have a tough time, all of a sudden I got to meet you. For example, Mark, like I got to meet you. I'm like, wow, like there's someone I can relate to. I feel like
Yeah.
there's I think it's all part of a plan, and sometimes I think it's part of it. And honestly, I think sometimes we as humans we screw up a lot of times, or like we try to do things because that's what we want, but sometimes it may not be what we need at the moment.
Yeah.
So and again, I like I said, none of us are perfect. It says so. We're all flawed, and
You know what? If you think anybody is perfect, anybody, you're mistaken because everybody has their own individuality and their own flaws and their own, quirks. Nothing's ever perfect.
no, I 100% agree with that. Also, too, Dad, to your point, I think I think that's what kind of hurts like mental health with people in general nowadays too, especially because like people are like, when especially nowadays how times are tough, for a lot of us. It's like man, we just want to try to just work hard and like something to break through. You know what I mean? We're just I don't know if desperation is the right word, but I think some people just like they look at it and you're like, whoa, maybe we're getting a little carried away with this, sometimes. I think maybe that's triggering a lot of mental health issues. Like we're trying to be perfect no matter, despite the fact that that's impossible.
Well, I mean, but nowadays we have phones with filters on them to attain that, and Instagram hashtags to promote our food that looks perfect, ASMR videos that satisfy our senses. I think technology though is where people search for that perfect meticulousness.
Yeah, and I think it can work to an extent, to be honest with you. But I think if you don't, and this is just my own opinion, if you don't like acknowledge like what could be causing it, it's only gonna like say numb the pain.
Hmm. I agree with that wholeheartedly. And what would you say to the younger generation? And when I say younger generation, somebody that is 5 years old and the next 10 years is going to hit that technology boom that's going to surpass both me and you. What would you say to them?
I think this is where like not to shove like religion down people's throats, but I think it's important for people to like realize like, technology is good, but it can only do so much.
Hmm.
And you got to realize that you're going to be human, you're going to make mistakes, but if you don't have that human connection and understanding, I think it's just going to make technology worse because like say for example technology, if we lose like the ability like electricity, if we lose our technology, a lot of young
Hmm.
kids they struggle with that. And if they lack like human connection, I think it's going to cause them a lot of problems. And I think I would tell the younger generation like to have morals, build something. It's okay to use technology. It's okay because we're flawed, we're human, we get it, we have our vices, but I would explain to them it's like that it's not the end all and be all, and it's a lot of times it's important to like show people that you care and that there is something beautiful and good in the world, that technology can never bring.
And I think that's going to be a tough thing for us to show the youth, if that makes sense. It's going to be a tough thing for us to show that to youth because over the next 10 years, I mean, AI is going to take over.
100%. 100%. I
So, so,
1000% agree with that.
so how do we separate this youth from, and let's be real, it's going to be mind altering, all this AI. because it's going to be so self-reliant for everybody to do stuff. How do you break that cord from that?
No, that's a great question. And plus, I often look back at this and think to myself, like, I think we were trying to live in an era where we're trying to make it easier for people, but I think we really made it harder because I think people have lost the value of like human connection. And I think as much as I think we should have made technology like an add-on instead of like the end all, the be all, because I think the idea of like, yeah, I like, let's say, for example, my generation, yeah, we like to play video games and all that stuff, but we still went out with
Mhm.
friends, like ride bike. We still went out and did things. We read books. Like there's more to life than just the technology. And I think people nowadays don't realize like either how badly we may have, like you said earlier, taking things for granted, like going outside and hanging out by the river, or just walking through the woods with people, or just actually like any kind of human contact or connection. Like just strike up a conversation with a random person, like say at a Sheets while you're waiting for your food, you know?
Yeah, that's something that's gonna. I have a feeling it's gonna be very lost in the future, though.
No, I do agree with you on that. I think it is going to be lost, but I think it's a shame because I think it's something that we could have nipped in the bud a long time ago and be like for example, like I have an opinion, but not everyone's going to agree with it. But that doesn't mean they hate me, nor does it mean they're supposed to. You know,
Yes,
like I
I
think
agree with that.
yeah, like I think that's what's going to be lost on some of these poor kids. You know, they're trying their best, you know, to make it through things, but they don't have that human contact where they're like someone could say something and be like, "Wait, what do you mean by that?" And instead of just be like, "Well, he or she wasn't being mean about it. They're just saying like, "Oh yeah, I just saw it because of this." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." Because we know them enough that they're not being jerks. But a
Hmm.
lot of these younger generations, because of technology, may not fully understand that. No, they might, but you know, I think we put too much into these technologies like AI and all that stuff. And I don't think we fully really grasp, so like maybe that might be a mistake. Like technology is good for some things, but like I still think we got to have, you know, human connection, which is rich coming from me considering I lived sheltered.
You know what though? That's all right. So even though you grew up sheltered, you still had, how can I put it, a more grounded perception of reality with less things. And I only say this because when I grew up in a generation where when I went to high school, we had pagers. We didn't have cell phones.
Yeah, I remember the pagers.
But that was my high school years. So I had interaction with everybody I've seen face to face.
Right.
Then cell phones came into play. We didn't have texting, we didn't have video calls or none of that stuff. And there was, how can I put it? I noticed when things started to change from there, how people started acting because everybody started having a cell phone then. You know, like, oh, look at me, look at me. It almost felt like a more, I don't want to say entitled kind of feeling. Maybe it might have been because of that technology boom. And then all of a sudden, texting came into play and internet was booming. And then all of a sudden, internet was on phones. And now we have smartphones and touch screens. And they went to the iPods and then iPads. And, you know, I watched it evolve so much techni technologically wise. And from people I grew up with to where they're at now, I've seen how technology has changed them. I've seen how technology has changed basically a whole generation. And that's why sometimes I go, I agree with you. I think we're going way too far with the technology to the point where we're going to lose that contact.
Well, also too, like say if heaven forbid that you don't wish, you know, war on anybody or you know, want to
Yeah.
cause, you know, war. But like say we get caught up in a battle and like our country loses like our ability to like technology, they take away our electricity, so we can't really use our technology.
Mhm.
So it's like, how do you think people are going to react to that? Like, it might become like a Mad Max situation where they're like, they're like fighting for power instead of just coming together and be like, hey, look, we have this common problem. Let's just find a way to fix it, you know?
Well, I mean, I look at it this way. When it comes to politics, neither side is for you. If they were for you, the American people, I don't care if it's Democratic, I don't care if it's Republican. If they were for you, you would be taken care of. There wouldn't be a government shutdown. There'd be none of this BS going on. I'm not a Trump supporter. I'm not a Democrat supporter. I could give two shits about it. The only thing I care about is the human population.
Well,
Excuse me.
yeah, no, and that's fine. And to add to your point, like, I'm not much into politics myself, for the obvious reasons, but I also look at it like you hear someone like criticize each other and they're saying like, well, you could have done this in your 4 years. And I said, well, so could have you.
And the 4 years before that, the 4 years before that.
Yeah,
You know,
like
I watch the videos like you see them out there making their big speeches and they're going against each other. But then you see videos behind closed doors where they're shaking hands, smiling and laughing. To me, it's just a big show. Because, like I said, if they really wanted to do stuff for the American people, they would already have gotten it done. There won't be this constant battle back and forth. And I think, that paper green money has a lot to do with some of the BS that we deal with. And unfortunately, the American public is stuck in the middle of it.
oh yeah, not I wouldn't say just America. I just say like people like in general. Like there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that get caught up in the middle of things, and it's like say whether it be a war or something like that. I'm like, dude, there's innocent people that are getting caught up in this.
Hmm.
Like and that's why I'm like, again, do I think sometimes war happens and you got to defend yourself? Yeah, but I also try to look at it like, look, let's just try not to like make it too vicious. You know what I mean? Because there's innocent people that can get caught up in things.
Unfortunately, I almost feel like in the state of the world right now, that all the civilians are pretty much just, stuck in the middle of one bad divorce.
No, that's actually pretty well put, actually.
You know, people, there's people out there struggling, uh, right now, and I've seen wait times at the food banks have been in excess of almost 4 hours. Um, so if they really wanted to take care of the people, they'd have been on it. But I think that stuff also takes its toll on mental health as well. I mean, we have a society where one portion of it relies on those benefits due to, you know, whatever life threw at them. I'm never going to talk bad about anybody that has to use a SNAP program or anything like that.
Of
Um,
course.
because it was there to help people, you know. So you have those people that are on it, and then there's people that have been raised on that kind of system. That's all they know. And who do you blame for that? It reverts back to the government. But then you also have the other spectrum too, the people that's, I don't take government handouts and blah blah blah. But that's also now all of a sudden you have a divide of people because of that instead of just being one.
Well, and also too, to add to your point, like people don't, they have no problem talking smack about someone's situation, but then it's like, well, when you look at the nuts and bolts of it, I'm like, okay, well, how do we actually fix it?
Hmm.
I tell people this all the time when it comes to like, politics and government. Like, say, like, for some, I think the issues that we've been dealing with have been dealing with for decades. But for some reason, some people think like this all started in 2020. And I'm like, well, okay, let's just say the stuff did happen like 5 years ago, right?
Hmm.
People don't realize like it may take 10, maybe a little more to get us back to where we were before the slide.
Hmm.
Like I think we have too many people in like position of power that think, or they're trying to get power, that they think that they solved a 100-piece puzzle, but they only put down one piece.
Exactly.
It's like people say like, well, if we just did this, everything will be fixed. I'm like, well, okay, well, how are we going to fix this problem then?
Hmm.
And they're like,
And
what do you mean?
it just goes like to show like what people can be focused on because they can be focused on that one thing. Yes, we got that, but how do we fix those other 10 problems behind that? You know, I agree with you there, man. Like, there's I agree with you.
Yeah, and for the record, like neither one of us are trying to be like malice about it. Like we're just saying this with love, because
Mhm.
there's people fighting each other, and it's like, well, wait a minute, like, are you sure you're getting like the whole story? Because you might be right about this one little thing, but what about the other thing? Like one of the things that
Yeah.
I always, like one of the things that I always thought was interesting by people when they get into arguments, like say, like I'll use. Do you care if I use you for an example, Mark?
No, go ahead, man.
Like say someone walks in on me and you having a conversation, right?
Mhm.
And people are like, "Why are you talking with Mark? He thinks the Earth is flat. He's dumb. Why would you talk to him about anything?" And it's like, well, okay, well, if he may believe the Earth is flat, but what does that have to do with asking him to help me with drywall?
Exactly.
Like we may disagree on the Earth being flat or whatever, but that's one thing. But this is something totally different.
Yeah. And I agree with that wholeheartedly. Um, I had somebody one time online that had said to me that I feel that politics are people's truth, and I disagree with that because in that aspect you're being forced to pick from a system that's already flawed and geared for failure.
Yeah, and like every system's flawed because it's made by humans. But I think what people need to understand is like, okay, well, we like this part and this might hurt, but we might need to find a way to like work around that then someday.
Yeah.
And you
I
gotta oh, go ahead.
No, no, go ahead, man.
Well, I was just gonna say to add to your point what you said earlier about how like people are like fighting over like something and like they think their system is better than like instead of people just fighting, I said, how about someone just come up with an idea? Let's work on it. And if there's some changes that need to be made as we go along, then we can make those changes. But at least do something that could possibly fix things.
Yeah. And all right, so I guess we can talk brief politics, but not like really into it. So
Right.
the one candidate out there, John Fetterman. Um, he's basically just he wanted things to work out to get things back into the American people's hands, food and stuff like that. And the back and forth BS with that. When I seen people going, "Oh, well, he's doing this," I'm like just complaining about it. I'm thinking to myself, this guy right here literally is just saying, "Let's get this back on track. Let's have talks, and let's figure this out." But there are people like complaining, "Oh, he's a traitor to the Democratic Party," or Republicans talking bad about him, and all the guy's trying to do is just like, "Hey, look, let's get our shit together."
No, 1,000%, 1,000%. I feel the same way when it comes to that because it's like the guy's just trying to like come up with an idea, and he's the only one that came up with an idea, and then everybody else is like arguing over it. And I said, well, let's just do the thing. If you don't have an idea, at least he came up with an idea. Let's just do it, and if there's ways we can improve upon it as we go along, then we can do that.
Yeah,
Why? I guess in layman's term, I guess what we're both trying to say is, why are we making this harder than it should be? I'm not saying it's easy, but it's easier than what we're making it.
exactly, exactly. Uh, and all right, so anybody that knows me, I love good conspiracies and stuff like that. It's just, it's just me. I always like to think outside the box. With
Nothing wrong with
everything going on, with everything going on these days, I've heard a conspiracy that, the government tries to put people on or tries to get them riled up for certain things when certain events are happening. Well, look how many directions we're pulled in right now.
it. Yeah.
If I was a conspiracy theorist, I would go, all the flags are going off right now.
No, especially without question. But then what's even worse too is like people then just like as time goes on and someone decides to like actually go look it up and like realize it like, oh, this wasn't like what I thought it was. But then instead of being mad about being lied to, they kind of just let it go. And then it's like, well, you gotta someone's gotta be held accountable for something.
Yes, yes. And here's a question for you. And this ties in with mental stability. Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
How many people have seen that video? But any other videos they censored within seconds. But I've seen that video for hours that day. Why?
Well, I'll go on to, God rest his soul, Charlie Kirk. It's a shame what happened to him. But like the thing that bothers me about the whole situation with him was that people then decide to go look up videos and they actually decide, instead of just going by what they were told, they actually go and watch the videos. And they're like, wow, he actually seemed pretty level headed and down to earth, middle kind of guy. And I said, well, yeah, if you actually would watch his stuff, he was about talking to people. He was trying to get people to come together and like find common ground and like, talk with people.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I
And like,
I may not have agreed with all of his things, but the one thing I said I questioned was why was his video not taken down? Excuse me. Why was his video not taken down for hours that day? It almost seemed like it was intentionally put out there to cause the rile on all platforms.
oh, it definitely, I mean, I'm not saying that's what it was, but definitely I can understand why people felt that way. Because I definitely think
Yeah,
there was something weird going on.
yeah. I mean, that was the only thing that struck me about that. Why did they leave that up for that amount of time without being censored anywhere?
Who knows? But I totally get where you're coming from with that, because, and again, rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, it's
Yeah,
a shame what happened to him. But I'm with you though. There's not to get too much into it because I don't know the whole story, but there's definitely some interesting stuff that I will say that happened, and I'm like, okay, that's
yeah. But that's my biggest question out of all that. Why did that video stay out there? I mean, everywhere else on everything else, videos were silenced except for that. And I truly think sometimes it boils back to the mental health thing. Because, like I was saying, in that conspiracy thing, if you keep people on edge, some conspiracy theorists are into that stuff.
oh yeah, no, definitely. There's definitely like a lot of, and I'm with you. I've never been much into conspiracies myself, but when you like, to add on to like to what you're saying too about that, you're like, huh, that's interesting. And then when you actually read on human history, like actual human history, you're like, wait, I don't remember this. How come this
Yeah,
wasn't mentioned before? Like there's a lot of things out there that nobody's brought up before, and it's like, huh, that's weird. But okay,
yeah. It's just
not
it's just those weird, just one of those things that I always thought like, are they intentionally trying to keep the population on edge in one way or another?
No, I'm with you on that because there's, like I said, there's times I'm just like shaking my head. I'm like, doesn't anybody else think this is weird? Like people are just getting violent for no reason. But,
Yeah,
but
I
I mean,
don't know, man. But that leads back to social media and stuff like that we were
oh,
talking about. That can take a toll on your mental health.
without question, in the mainstream media as well. Like they're constantly
Yep.
fighting over each other, and it's like, well, wait a second. Like I don't think it's exactly like that. Let's not get too carried away. And and even if, like I
Depend.
said, if there is truth to like some of these things, like people then think that it justifies them like trying to do something to somebody else. I'm like, well, that person didn't do anything wrong. Why are you taking it on them?
Exactly. That's why I say I think social media is a big problem. It can be good for a lot of things and technology, but just that alone right there makes me question a lot of things.
No, I 1000% agree with that. I think technology's good if it's like an assistant, but if it's like the end all that be all, like they're trying to do with AI and all that stuff, I'm not too comfortable with that.
I have a feeling it's going the Terminator route. Unfortunate to say.
Honestly, it's frightening because you can see the similar, not to get all conspiracy theory, but it's like
Well,
you can
you can see it.
you can see it.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not a conspiracy guy like that or anything, but you know, but yeah, like I was saying, back to the whole technology thing. I've seen how what it's done, through the generations and stuff like that. And The Terminator was a movie from the '80s, and I'm kind of seeing it come to life. So,
Because to add to your point, I saw a lot of Demolition Man. I was like, the
uh,
Zoom, the Zoom calls, like what we're doing, or like you can't say certain words even though that's not what they mean.
hmm
No, it's like
Demolition Man. All right, that's a movie I haven't heard about for a while. Have you ever figured out what the three seashells were about?
the what was that?
Have you figured out what the three seashells were about?
No,
Do you remember what I'm talking about?
not off the top of my head.
All right, so when they thawed him out and he came back to life, they didn't use toilet paper in the restrooms. They had three seashells, and he couldn't figure it out what they were used for throughout the whole movie.
Huh?
Go back and look at it. It's a small scene in it, but it lasts throughout the whole movie.
I'll have to, yeah, I'll have to rewatch that. But but getting back, I'll try to let's, maybe try to, end things on a more positive note because I think it's
Definitely.
important. I think it's important though that people that struggle with mental health and like, people out there in the world is like we need more love in the world. I guess is what I'm getting at.
Hmm.
And to me and like, and actually I'll give some credit to my twin brother Chad. He came up with a cool concept that I 1000% agree with. He went to some people and he goes, we need to love and understand each other. And he goes and asks people a question. And he goes,
Hmm.
what's the most important word in that sentence? And people would always say love. And he was like, no, that's incorrect. The most important word is and. You need to love and understand each other.
Yeah.
Words have both.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. And even if you don't fully understand, I think part of it too is you have to accept that you don't understand. If that makes sense, instead of fighting against it.
No, no,
Because
I
there's a lot of
1000.
people, they don't, if they don't understand it, they go against it. And sometimes I think if we don't understand, we have to accept that we don't understand it, but accept it for what it is because it is somebody else.
Yeah, no, I'll give you for example. Like my mom, bless her heart, she tries her best. There's a
Hmm.
lot of things about me that she doesn't understand, but I've grown to accept that. But that again, that doesn't mean she doesn't love me. She does love me. Like you're gonna stand out. I guarantee you, if I ever had a kid, and that's a big if, but if I ever had a kid, I guarantee you, I'm probably not going to be able to fully understand him or her.
That's just the way it goes, man. It's the generational gap. So, like with my kids, uh, they use terms like yurt, which is yes, and that's their generation. But then there's this new generation where kids that are doing this 6-7 thing. I don't understand it.
Don't understand that either. What exactly? How does it even start? I don't understand this.
I have no clue. I have no clue. I'm still trying to catch up on the generational language barrier with my kids right now.
How are the kids doing, by the way?
Good, good. Just had my grandson for the weekend, so that was always a pleasure. He keeps me on my toes. My oldest son, he's just working a lot, working, working, working. Glad he was able to get out this weekend, him and his wife. While we babysat the little one. And my youngest son, he just started up his catering business, so that's starting to take off for him. My daughter just started a new job, actually working in mental health for the Reading Hospital. And unfortunately, I hate saying this because this is another part of my mental worries. She goes over to Kuwait in April, so
Oh,
she's in the
bless her
middle.
heart.
She's in the army. Yeah, she's a Seaburn, so she gets to deal with everything chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear. So
Well,
Yeah,
my thoughts and prayers to her, man.
thank you, thank you. She's not worried about it, but being a parent and stuff like that, and especially everything going on in the Middle East, it's one of those things. I'm always biting my nails.
Well, understandably so, but to go back a little bit, you kind of touched on it for a short bit. You said you got to hang out
Mhm.
with the grandkid. We talked about
Oh
the
yeah.
importance of human connection,
Hmm.
like being able to like, I mean, is it fair to say that hanging out with the grandkid does wonders of your mental health?
Oh, definitely. All right. So one thing I can always tell you, and it's a forced situation. I talk about it all the time. When you're going through bouts of depression or anxiety or, panic attacks and stuff like that, try to keep yourself occupied. The more occupied you are, the less you'll deal with it. Unfortunately, it's kind of like, eventually you do have to face things head on. But if you're staying productive in your daily life, like my grandson, he keeps my mind off stuff. So because he's not even a full year old yet. I'm always worried, what's he gonna get into? Is he gonna start crawling yet? What's he saying? Like there's so many factors that go into it because my attention is so focused on him. Even though I can go through a PTSD moment or depression or whatever's going on with me, when I'm around him, I push it all to the side because he's my number one focus because I'm his caregiver in that moment.
No, and I think
It
it's a beautiful thing to have.
it is, and that's why I say like, so if you got a grandson, granddaughter, whatever, take the time with them, because you will notice a difference in yourself in the end. And it's the same thing too. Like if you got an animal, my brother, he had a dog. Her name was Layla, and think that was one of the things that was keeping him going because he had to take care of another living creature. And it's always a blessing because they give us love back, um, and it's that human connection you were talking about.
Yeah, and again, it's rich coming from me, but I think human connections is completely underrated and didn't get enough. I think we definitely took that for granted.
I can agree with that 100%. 100%. Um, I think if we go out to dinner and stuff like that, I think all cell phones should be, put in a lockbox while we eat, so that way we can actually converse and talk about life and what's going on. And that's another thing too. I think family dinners. I know we live in a day and age where everybody can get DoorDash, fast food, or we have different schedules. You're in high school, you got an after school job, and you don't have the family dinners like you used to. But one thing when my kids were growing up that we'd always do was good thing, bad thing. So every night at dinner, we'd always start off and, one good thing that happened for the day, one bad thing that happened for the day. It was a nice way to get to know what was going on in my kids' lives and what was making them happy and sad. Um, and that was my one of my human connections with them.
No, that's awesome. And like you said, it's tough to do that nowadays. But again, it goes back to like not only like human connections, but also cherishing those because they may happen less and less. But it's like I think it still should be cherished when it does happen because people don't realize how beautiful it really is.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. That's one thing I definitely miss with growing up from my early years was family dinners and stuff like that. I'd have family that was spread out all the way from New York, Massachusetts down to Georgia, and they would all get together and come over to the house for Thanksgiving. So when I was younger and I got to see all my extended family like that, I absolutely loved it, you know. But as time went on, the connection started getting lost. Cousins got older, aunts and uncles got older. They weren't driving as much, so it just happens with time. You got to keep the tradition going.
No, amen to that. And I think it's like I said, it's beautiful, and I think that's what we should all try to focus on. And I think that's the ultimate message I'm trying to do. And I think you're trying to say as well in this episode is, I think we all need to try to learn to love more and understand more and realize that it's not always what you think it is.
Amen to that. I can 100% agree with you there.
And with that being said, Mark, do you have any future projects you'd like to mention real quick?
Oh, let me see here. Tomorrow on the Bartender Shootbox, um, I will have Mr. Phil Insane. He's a up and coming death match wrestler in the Pennsylvania area. And the following week, let's see here, Monday the 24th at 6 p.m., I will be on the air with Travis Orndorff. He is the son of the late, great Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff. the WWE Hall of Fame legend. Um, Now we will talk some wrestling, me and Travis, when we get into some things. But Travis is also part of a Christian missionary, and we will definitely be talking about his new ventures and stuff like that. I think you might be doing some stuff with Mark Marrow as well. And I don't know. All I can say is just tune in, join the conversation, and keep supporting Josh here. He's doing great things,
I
and
appreciate it.
like I said, check it out over on the Bartenders Jukebox Facebook page. And I always say on my podcast, stay thirsty for life.
No, no, amen to that. And once again, Mark, I just hope and pray nothing but the best for you and your family, and continue to support the Bartender's Jukebox. It's a great podcast. And again, I appreciate you, Mark, and thank you for coming on tonight.
And likewise, my friend, you are more than welcome anytime. Please feel free to hit me up. But this probably would have been done earlier in the week, but I'm very open and honest about things. I was dealing with some PTSD this week, but anytime you want to, and I'm not dealing with a battle, I'll be more than happy to.
No, I appreciate that. And I just want to say, love you. God bless you. And to everyone that's watching, thank you for watching, and God bless and be safe, everybody.